So we begin a new program tonight. We're very honored to welcome to the ashram for the first time Urmila Devi Dasi. So we'll introduce her. She's here to offer a 3-day program consisting of 2 evening satsangs, today and tomorrow. And also tomorrow and day after tomorrow, she'll be offering both the workshops, noon and 2 p.m. workshops. So the name of the program is the Yogic Path of Right Livelihood. And Urmila Devi Dasi has been practicing bhakti yoga and meditation since 1973 and teaches internationally. She earned her Doctor of Education from the University of North Carolina and has been a professor in sociology and education at Bhaktivedanta College in Belgium. Urmila has authored many books and dozens of articles, and her upcoming book is with Rukmini Devi Dasi or Dr. Ruchira Datta. Let us welcome Urmila Devi Dasi. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Sam Sujivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lavita Shri Vishakam Vitamshcha Vanchakalpatri Vishcha Kipasindhavya Vijapatitanam Bhavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Thank you very much for having me here. This presentation is the result of a book I've been working on with Rukmini, Dr. Ruchira Datta, for the last 3 years. And we had hoped that it would be published by today, but it's going a little bit more slowly than we had anticipated. I do have a couple books in the boutique, if you're interested, and they're also on Amazon. And Rukmini and I have been presenting bits and pieces of this book throughout the world as we've been working on it. But this is the first time that I'll be presenting this particular sequence in this particular way. So because of that, I'd be very grateful for any feedback, positive, negative, neutral, interesting, that you have on it. The way that we're going to be structuring this is tonight and tomorrow night, we're going to look at a particular way of understanding how to match our nature to our livelihood. And then in the workshops, we're going to be looking at an entirely different way of matching our nature to our livelihood. On the 4th workshop, we're going to be putting it all together. So I want to look at 2 verses from the Bhagavad Gita, which are from 2 different sections where Sri Krishna discusses the idea of work and spiritualizing one's work. So maybe we could say this together. We can just say it. Sadrisham chestate swasyaha prakriter gyanavam api prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a person of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the 3 modes. What does repression accomplish? And this is from a section in the 3rd chapter that specifically deals with work and livelihood. And this section is repeated in the 18th chapter, which is, of course, a summary of the Bhagavad Gita. And if we could say this together. Swe swe karmanya birata samsiddhim labate naraha swakamanyartha siddhim yata vindati tachchanu. By following the qualities of work, everyone can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done. So a reason that's motivated me to look at this particular aspect of spirituality was something that was touched upon yesterday by Swami Paramananda, where he was talking about that when one goes home, one could keep a spiritual diary, yes? I think many of you were here last night. But he also talked about the difficulty when all of life comes in on you of keeping up some sort of spiritual practice. And I'm sure that many of us have experienced this. And in analyzing why this is so, I believe one reason has to do not with the specific spiritual practices and sadhana themselves, but with our life in general. If our way of maintaining ourselves and our family is not resonating with our sadhana itself, then keeping up the sadhana becomes very difficult. Now, the way Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita is holistic, that one will have an entire life dedicated to spirituality. Now, this concept may seem very difficult to those of us who are not renunciates, sannyasis, karma yogis, living in an ashram. How do I do that? How do I make my work at the bank? How do I make my work at the grocery store, whatever one is doing, such that it's completely spiritual? Now, there's many aspects to this. In our upcoming book, we look at 8 different principles of what we call career dharma. But we're going to be looking at the next 3 days is just one main aspect, but from 2 different visions, and that is matching our nature to our livelihood. Matching our nature to our livelihood. I believe very strongly that Bhagavan is all merciful, all good, and all merciful. We are meant to have lives full of joy, just like you were chanting, I am bliss. But I am bliss is not just for those who are fully enlightened and realize, but everything in our life is meant to be full of joy. And what's one of the greatest expressions of joy is when who we are uniquely is in harmony with the greater good, is in unity with the greater good. When we can feel that I, as an individual, am doing something that fully expresses myself, that fully meets my needs, that connects me with the universe and with the divine, and that serves the society. Is that pretty accurate? Would that be something that would bring us great happiness? All right, so as I say, tonight and tomorrow night, we're going to be looking at one particular way of understanding our nature and connecting it to our livelihood. This is a way that Rukmini and I found in our research is not looked at very much, although it's in the Vedas, it's in the Shastras. It's something that people don't talk about very much. What we'll be looking at in our workshops is a little bit more commonly spoken about, although we're going to be looking at it from an entirely, I hope, fresh perspective. So tonight and tomorrow night, we're going to look at 6 ways to be prosperous. Tonight, we're just going to look at those 6 ways and what does it mean for each of us as an individual to be rich. And tomorrow, we're going to look at those 6 ways and how we can cherish them and nurture them in our life and in the cosmos. So the first question, and I think this is an obvious question for this particular audience, is wealth only money? When we say I have a wealthy life, do we measure our wealth just in money? Now, all one has to do is open up the news on any particular day, and you'll read about somebody who's rich and unhappy. Am I correct? And I'm sure we all know people who are cash rich, but their lives are not prosperous. And maybe we've experienced that in our own life. Maybe we've had a time in our own life when there was plenty of cash, but we wouldn't say, I have a rich and prosperous life. Now, everybody knows this. I was saying, particularly, I think this audience knows this, but anywhere I presented this, everybody nods their heads. We all know that cash and prosperity do not have a one-to-one equivalence. How ironic is it that in so much of the world, people are pushed towards a very early age to define prosperity and a rich and satisfying life primarily in terms of cash. Now, conversely, do we know people who are cash poor and very happy? Maybe there's been times in our life where we felt that we had a rich, prosperous life, but maybe, we couldn't rub two bills together. And again, this is something that everybody knows. Everyone knows that people with a lot of cash may not be the prosperous ones, and people without a lot of cash may be prosperous. That somehow that's not wealth in life. So, what makes each of us feel prosperous? Because we're looking here at connecting who I am. Each of us, in one sense, each of us is the same. We're each Brahman, we're each spirit. And in another sense, each of us is a unique individual. If you look at snow, it's all snow, and yet each snowflake is unique. Our fingerprints are unique. Our DNA is unique. So for each of us, there's a certain way that we feel prosperous. So something that I'd like to suggest, maybe right now we can think about it, and then on your own time, this is a good thing to do in writing. What is it in my life that I love? And we're not talking about gratitude. We'll touch on gratitude tomorrow night. But what do I love? And I'm not talking about a person or an animal, but what is there in life that I love? That really fills me with joy. And one way to understand something about our nature is to make a list. What do I love? A few months ago, one friend of mine challenged me to do this. Every day, write about something that you love, but not a person and not an animal. And at first, it was a little bit of a challenge. What do I love? What do I love? And I found that I was spending much of the day thinking about what is there in my life that I love. By the way, that made me a very happy person. Then after you make a list of what you really love in your life, I would suggest that you take one item, if possible per day, or maybe even per week, and expand it. So I can give you a little hint of one of the things I wrote, and I just have an example. I actually wrote much more than this. But I wrote, I love artwork. In my space, I will put fine art, framed. I like to be able to pay artists, to support artists. I appreciate sculpture. I appreciate fabric art, double ikat designs and hand-woven organic cotton, hand-knotted Persian rugs, intricate tapestries, hand-loom clothing, hand-embroidered clothing. There was a time in my life that every time I would go to India, I would shop for fabric and clothes for my friends, not as a business. I don't think I've ever done a business in my life. But I would get these and bring it back for different people. And I found that as I took this list of something that I love art. Like you mentioned that I produced some books. So in one of the books I commissioned all new oil paintings and all new sketches. And one of the books I'm working on now, I've also commissioned new watercolor. So I love working with art. I like having it in my environment. Again, textile art, sculpture, and it's something that brings me great joy. And I found that as I wrote about this 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, it really made me feel how this was some way in which my life was prosperous if I could surround myself with art. And I did this for 10 days where I wrote each day about something that I love in depth. that already exists in my life or that has existed in some time in my life. And I would really suggest this as an exercise for each of us to discover, what is it that makes my life prosperous? And again, I'm not talking just about gratitude. I'm grateful when I wake up in the morning that I can breathe. I'm grateful that my hands work. I'm grateful for the food on my plate. But that might not be something that I love. Do you follow the distinction? Yes? So we're going to look at 6 ways to be rich and how this is related to career. So what of the things that we love is related to these 6 ways to be rich? Now we're going to look primarily at the Sanskrit words, and one reason we're going to do that is that these are somewhat complex topics. It's possible to put a one-word English definition on some of these, but you lose a little bit of the nuances. So we're going to explain each of them in turn. Now, as we do so, I'd like to ask each of you to think about, when did I have this kind of prosperity in my life? And especially in relationship to my career. When was my career, my livelihood, giving me this kind of richness? Or if you're so young that you haven't yet started a career, is there some kind of career I could think about that is likely to give me this sort of wealth? Then how do I feel when I have it? Do I like it? Does this kind of wealth enrich my life? Or is it like, it's okay. It's all right. I can have it. I cannot have it. How do I feel when I don't have it? Is it like, well, it's not here? Or, wow, I really feel my life is vacant without this kind of prosperity. And then to ask, is this currently a part of a career that I'm doing? Is it currently part of the way I maintain myself? And if not, how could it be? Now, I'd like to mention that a career doesn't necessarily have to be how you get cash, because I think there's some of you here who don't really have a cash-based career. But a career could also be, how do I live? How do I get my food? How do I get my clothing? How do I get my place to live? What we want is our livelihood to be full of life. Now, one thing that I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but I just want to put it out there in case any of you are thinking that I'm missing this tonight, is that these 6 kind of wealths can be enjoyed in a spiritual way or in an illusion way. But we're going to look at that tomorrow night and not tonight. So the first form of wealth is called Aishvarya. Aishvarya, for those of you who know Sanskrit, is related to the word Ishvara, which means a controller. This wealth is when we have power. Now, I know the word power is often used pejoratively. Oh, I don't want any power. But there is a great pleasure and richness for many people in having leadership, organizational leadership, the kind of leadership where you're directing many people, where if you ask people to do things, they're likely to do them. Something where we have some sense of power and authority. And there's many people who thrive on this kind of wealth in their life, which is a very good thing because we need organizational leaders in society. We wouldn't be able to get anything done unless there were people who were energized by this feeling of Aishvarya. Aishvarya can also refer to luxury in general. So sometimes this is the richness that's most associated with cash or with luxury. But it can also mean having a sense of controllership in one's own life, a lot of autonomy, a lot of self-control. If I like to start my own projects, I don't really want anybody else telling me what to do. I don't necessarily want of a team. So it could be people who are really energized by leading others, by guiding others, directing others, taking care of others, or people who really want to take care of themselves. Now again, you see this is not applicable to everyone. Some people want to be a part of a partnership. They want to be part of a team. Other people would rather that somebody else say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? If we like to engage other people in meaningful work, we like to provide what they need. If we like to generate this wealth for others, we like to give others a sense of autonomy. We want to give others a sense of leadership, others a sense of power and control. Then this richness of Aishvarya may be very important to us in our life. We should also mention that Krishna says very clearly, both in the 3rd and the 18th chapter, as we mentioned, what is repression accomplished, that if this is a way that we feel wealthy, and we don't have this as part of our livelihood, we're going to try to do it anyway. There's a lot of places where I've been to give classes, and there'll be somebody in the audience that tries to control the whole situation. One time when I was in Melbourne, I was giving a class. The room was very crowded, and lots of people were coming in late, and so I asked everybody, please move forward, please move forward. About 10 minutes into my class, one of the participants got up and, speaking very loudly, said, everybody has to move forward now. And the person was so loud that I had to stop speaking and just wait. Are you done? And then I said, do you have any kind of managerial job? Do you have any kind of leadership position? And she said, no. And I said, you really need one. The next is jnana. Jnana means knowledge, wisdom, intelligence, philosophy, science, hard sciences, soft sciences, the process of learning, the process of understanding. Now, again, some people really aren't that interested in this in their life. There's a lot of people who aren't particularly curious. All they want to know is what they need in order to get by every day. You know, maybe their knowledge extends to what movie star is dating what other movie star. But there are some people for whom Gyan is their very life. They're always studying, they're always learning, they're always curious. They always want to find out more and more and more and more and more. Maybe they want to find out the essence of things, or maybe even the essence of one thing. You know, there are people who study the mating habits of the one-toed crab in such and such river. And there's some people who want to study on a very broad level. They want to study the whole cosmos. People who, if they spend 4 or 5 hours of reading a day, when they go to bed, they think, I didn't spend enough time reading. My co-author for this book, her house looks something like that, actually. I mean, I think she has more books in her house than in a library. All of the walls are covered with books. And you know how in libraries there's these rolling carts with books on them? She has those throughout her house, too. And it turns out she's got boxes of books in storage as well. You know, or people who they're always reading, always studying, always philosophizing. Now, this level of Gyan can also refer to all levels of knowing, if any of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy in education. So just having information, or understanding that information, analyzing information, synthesizing information, evaluating information. People who like to play with knowledge. Then there's virya. So virya means strength, power, health. It can also literally refer to sexual vitality. Virya is very prominent in all kinds of sports, dance, warfare, anything that requires a lot of physical strength and endurance, and anything related to health. People who have careers that are very involved with health. If you're dealing with herbs, chiropractic, Ayurveda, yoga asanas, then virya is going to be a very important part of what's rich. Now, again, everybody wants good health. But for some people, even if their health isn't great, it's not that important to them. And it's not so much a part of what makes their life rich. I'm sure we can think of somebody who has their heads so much in books that maybe they never go out for exercise and they don't care. Yes? But for some people, virya is everything. They spend many hours a day exercising or in dance or in yoga or in martial arts, or they're very dedicated to sports or something with the healing professions. Virya can also refer to the strength of mind. So those for whom meditation, control of the mind, and peace of mind is very important also in their career. Now, that's not important in everybody's career. Some people enjoy a career where they're managing 1,000 things at once, and their mind isn't at one point. Perhaps we know somebody like that. Perhaps we're like that. Perhaps we like 12 different plates juggling in the air at one time. But other people, they want this absolute focus and mental strength. Something that can sustain a process from beginning to end is also part of virya. If you're the kind of person who likes to start a project, maintain it, bring it to fruition, virya may be very important to you in your career. Again, not everybody's like that. Some people are happy just to do a little piece here and there. Then we have Shri. Shri refers to splendid beauty, gracefulness, and charismatic leadership. This is a little bit different kind of leadership from Aishvarya. Aishvarya is a leadership of power and organization. Shri is kind of the leadership where you glow, where you float. Something about majesty. Now, it's interesting that Shri is a name for Lakshmi, and as we'll look at a little bit tomorrow when we look at how to cherish these different wealths and prosperities in our life, that in one sense, Shri refers to prosperity in general. But at the same time, it's a particular kind of wealth. Leadership due to attractive qualities rather than control and organizational abilities. It also is very much related to feminine beauty and romantic love, whereas virya is often associated a little bit more with masculinity. Any of the realm of aesthetics and art. If you love to paint, you love music, sculpture, dance, theater, architecture, landscaping, or anything where beauty is just an integral part of one's idea of a prosperous life. Then there's yasha. Yasha literally means fame, but it's not just that people are talking about you. If people are talking about you, that can be kirti, which is related to the word kirtan. But people might talk about you for all kinds of reasons. And there are lots of people today who are just famous for being famous. But yasha is a little different. Yasha in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavat Purana, is the child of kirti and dharma. So if people are talking about you because of dharma, if people are talking about us because we've done something good, meritorious fame, not just fame. Now, this particular kind of prosperity is very related to community. It's not possible to have the prosperity of people talking about you and admiring us because we've done something meritorious unless we know people. So hermits aren't particularly interested in this kind of prosperity. Hermits, people who live in some Himalayan cave and the world doesn't know them and they never talk to one and they take a vow of silence for 10 years, this is not important for people like that. Or if someone does a project and they're happy to have someone else's name on it and they don't really care. But those of us who really thrive on community, we want to be surrounded by family, we want to be surrounded by friends, we really want to be part of a society. And we like being able to act virtuously and to be appreciated in our community for acting virtuously. Now, this is also the satisfaction we get from honoring others for their right intentions. If we like to give awards to others, we like to recognize others, We like to encourage others in that way. We like to appreciate others in that way. Anyone for whom society is really important has this wealth of yasha. Then we have vairagya. Now, raga literally means attachment. Vai means without. This perhaps is the strangest kind of wealth. Because people who don't love this kind of wealth think it's the absence of wealth. They don't understand it as a kind of prosperity at all. It's a kind of equanimity and freedom. It can be an inner state of equanimity where the mind is free from all attachment and aversion, an inner identity separate from labels and designations, sarvapadi vinirmuktan. It can even mean external. People where all their possessions fit in a backpack. Years ago when I was in India, I met one gentleman, and I travel light, but this guy had only a backpack. I mean, I have a backpack and a bag. He had only a backpack. And he used to be a dental surgeon. Now he just travels the world with just his backpack, with no home. I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well, I stay with friends, and I also go places where people are in need of dental services, and I offer them free dental services, and then I move on." Someone who has a very minimalist house. They don't have a lot of furniture. They don't have a lot of possessions. Maybe they don't have a big social network. People who are energized by giving other people equanimity and freedom, helping other people to downsize and become free. A sense of not being dependent on circumstances. A sense of not being dependent on other people's approval for one's happiness. Now, the reason vairagya looks like the opposite of wealth and prosperity to most people is that it often involves the lack of things. People who love vairagya often have very few things. They often have very small social networks. Many times they don't even have a home. People who have a career where they travel a lot. And so they may appear to be poor to others. What's particularly interesting about this prosperity of vairagya, it's the only one of the 6 kinds of wealth that is, practically speaking, not dependent on external circumstances. To have the wealth of Aishwarya, you have to have people that are willing to let you lead them. To have Gyan, you have to have a mind that's able to assimilate knowledge and study. To have Shri, you have to have your own beauty or be surrounded by beauty. Virya, some physical or mental health. Yasha, community. And all of those, my dear friends, and we'll look at this again tomorrow, can be taken away externally in a moment. A disease, an accident. One can lose one's health. On the internet today, it's very easy to lose one's fame in a moment. One can lose everyone who follows one, all of one's beauty, all of one's knowledge. Am I correct? Can all be gone in a moment. But vairagya is something very difficult for anyone else or any other circumstance to take away. It's possible. We have stories in the Shastra of great vairagis, like Vishvamrita, who in a moment became attracted by a Menaka. So it's possible. But those whose wealth is full of vairagya, one of the satisfying aspects of it is that it's not very much dependent on external circumstances. It's a wealth that one can give oneself in any kind of a situation. So it's interesting of the 6 kinds of wealth, very often misunderstood by people who don't like it, and something that is not easily offset by time and circumstance. So again, looking at all of these, Aishwarya, Gyan, Virya, Shri, Yasha, and Vairagya. As we've been going through them, I hope that you were thinking, which of this really resonates with me? When I've had this in my life, how did I feel? Did it matter to me? Was it really important? Or was it like, it doesn't matter if it's here or not? And when I didn't have it, how did I feel? Do I have it in the way that I maintain myself? And if not, what could I do to get it? Which of these do I naturally bring to a situation? When I'm with others, when I'm in a place, what do I want to give to others? What do I want to share with others? Do I want to help other people to become leaders? Do I want help other people to become knowledgeable, to have lives full of beauty, to be detached, to be meritorious? Let's look at it as an example of a theoretical person. So this person's a web designer and an artist, works from home, has a flexible schedule, keeps track of her own hours and billing customers. She mostly works for nonprofits, friends, and family members. The prosperity she gets from her work are Shri, because she has a lot of aesthetics that she's devising when she creates web pages. Also Vairagya, because her job gives her a lot of freedom and flexibility. And she has a little bit of Yasha, because she's getting a lot of appreciation from her community. So I'd like each of us to think for a moment. What would my ideal richness look like? If I could create my most prosperous life through my means of livelihood, which of these would be absolutely essential for me? One of them, two of them? That if I didn't have them, I'd say my life was poor? Which of them it would be nice, but it isn't essential? Do I have this in my career? Am I matching my career with my nature? Many times the Shastras describe the universe as a great body called the Vishvarup. We could say that each of us in this universe is like a tiny cell as part of the universal body. And each of us have a particular function in the universal body. When we're doing that function, we are filled with the kind of prosperity and richness that gives us a very deep satisfaction. And we also find our greatest meaning. In spirituality, we don't see a disparity between what brings me the greatest kind of satisfaction in my livelihood and how I can contribute best to the universe and to society in general. Now, these 6 kinds of prosperity exist unlimitedly in Bhagavan. They exist unlimitedly in the divine. And in one sense, we are each the inheritors of all of these in a spiritual sense. At the same time, according to our individual nature, there's ways in which we are meant to enhance our prosperity and the prosperity of others. You can think of these also as a kind of taste. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Ayurvedic taste. Sweet, salty, sour, bitter, pungent, astringent, and so forth. And we have certain tastes that we like, yes? And certain tastes that particularly resonate with our physiology and with our psychology, if you study the 3 Ayurvedic types and different types of food that will nourish us. So there's also different types of prosperity that will nourish us. And what's very interesting is that when the way that we maintain our body and mind is in harmony with how we find richness, then we are functioning in our proper position. When we are functioning in our proper position, then we will feel energized by our life, and feeling energized by our life, we are much more able to find the time and space and energy to take up our direct spiritual practices. Indeed, then our direct spiritual practices start to permeate our life, and there's nothing separate from spirituality. Now, this aspect of joining livelihood to nature is one of about 8 principles of the career dharma as given in the scripture. It's not the only one. If this is all one does, it's not sufficient. So it's a necessary and not sufficient. And what we'll be looking at tomorrow and the next day in the workshops is a very different model. We'll be looking at 4 fields of work in terms of our nature: the field of ideas, the field of government, the field of resources, and the field of artistry, and which of those resonates with us as a person. And then, as I said in our last session in the workshops, we're going to be combining these 6 ways of being rich with the 4 fields to come up with a holistic sense of in which way career would be harmonized with our nature. Other principles of career dharma, which I'm not going to be discussing on this particular trip, would be the process of giving in charity, working without ego, and things of that type. So I wanted to leave a few minutes if anybody has any questions or any comments. As I said, tomorrow night we'll be looking at these 6, but in terms of how to cherish them and how to use them in a way that's in connection with the divine.
So when you think about balancing ourselves, or when we aspire for some of these 6 elements in our career, is it that we have an internal tendency towards some of them, and we should try to find a career that actually enhances those aspects?
Yes, exactly.
And so we actively look for things.
Exactly like one should look for food that nourishes oneself. Exactly in the same way.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed the slides that you had with your presentation. They really helped to
Thank you.
help the ideas stick.
Thank you.
And they went well with the words, and I think you have a very smooth and clear way of communicating. So thank you for passing on that message very smoothly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question, comment? So again, I'd like to ask all of you, if you have time tomorrow, if you can make some list, or in the next few days, or even after you leave, those of you who are just visiting, to make a list of what is it in my life that I love? Again, not a person or an animal, but what is it in my life that I love? Then taking one a day or one a week if you can and expanding it. How do I love this? In what way do I love this? How does this bring a feeling of richness and satisfaction to my life? And then looking at these 6 ways of being rich and saying, am I working in a way that's really bringing this to my life? And if not, how can I increase this? Thank you very much. Om Tat Sat. I was told that none of you would mind if I ended a few minutes early at night.
We would like to thank very much Urmila Devi Dasi for this talk. Let's give her a big hand. Do you want to say something about the workshops tomorrow?
I did.
Okay. Yes. So
I was told to, so I did. Yeah. And I was also told to tell you all that I have 2 books in the boutique. I was also told to tell all of you that I have 2 books in the boutique. So I didn't have any here to show you, but one of them is called The Great Mantra for Mystic Meditation. It's a very short book, and the other is called Essence Seekers, which is a spiritual novel. And it's something, I think it was the most fun I ever had in my life was writing that. So it's based on metaphors from the Bhagavad Purana, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srimana Shiksha. And it's the story of spiritual seekers who go from material life to full enlightenment. And I wrote it in language for people who are not familiar with the yogic traditions. So it's the kind of book you can really give to anyone. So there's just a few copies in the gift shop. If you don't get them there, they are on Amazon, print, Kindle, and Essence Seekers is in Audible also. So, okay. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.